movie called Carbon. Yeah. It's a short film, for short film format, 45 minutes. Starts in the year 2017 when they showed images of there is still water flowing and rivers are clean and there is fresh air. Definitely not shot in Delhi. Uh, and then it quickly moves to the year 2047. And the whole planet has been carbonized. And bottled or canned oxygen is the biggest enterprise. And there is piped oxygen in the homes. And like if you are living in some less privileged locality, then there are oxygen cuts. So every time they'll announce now that there's going to be no oxygen for 2 hours, so everybody should wear their masks. And the stereotypes. So Musawala is the kingpin of smuggling oxygen. So the stereotypes from the current still carry on. And
I don't think that's ever going to change.
but it's interesting. So I thought I'll just regale you with that before we start the actual presentation. But the context of our talk today is about carbon. I mean, how everything has a carbon footprint and how important it is, which Gautam has put it into numbers there, how time is running out and maybe next 50.
My lines. Okay.
No, you give me a mic and I won't stop. You have to take the mic, snatch the mic.
What is this? I already even wrote things down. Okay.
I'm so sorry. I'll give the mic.
No,
Thank you.
He's a politician, by the way. This may come as a surprise to you. Oh, okay. All right. Some of you need the mic at the back. All right. So, hi, good morning. It's a bit early, I know, so thanks for making the effort. There were several of, well, not several, but there were almost 3 of us over here who didn't make it ourselves. There was a lot of protest when Shobha gave us the slot of 9 o'clock. It cut down on drinking time last night, basically.
I left at 7.
So anyway, so you know, one of the things that as we've been going along is actually talking about sustainability, and it's become, you know, obviously a hot topic. The issue really is how do you measure it? Sustainability has a number. We talk in sort of in loose terms, but sustainability has a number, and that number is 0. So listening to people, you know, yesterday at some of the talks and, you know, just looking, you know, around the gathering. So there's clearly a growing realization that imprecise, adjective-laden, non-numeric definitions of sustainability are no longer fit for purpose. In any case, they will not satisfy the mandatory legal reporting and verification requirements that governments, starting with the EU, as many of you know, are going to be imposing on the travel industry in a phased manner. And I think for small scale, it's going to come down the road around 2030. Most of the elements that constitute sustainability are quantifiable, measurable, and numeric. And that's the key. They are numeric. They are not imprecise. To capture baseline data, reduce emissions and waste, and measure improvements, we need the precision of numbers. For those of us owning or operating small lodges or hotels, and this is where we are starting from as an accessible cohort, all of this can at first glance be quite intimidating. So this joint presentation in 3 segments is designed to demystify and make accessible these fairly complex calculations and data capture technology. It is an introduction, a sort of primer, to the kind of rigorous DIY auditing, mitigation or reduction, and reporting methods that we will all have to adopt in order to align with globally accepted and statutorily mandated standards of sustainability. All of it subject to very robust and globally accepted validation, which is of course the key component to this entire process. So the first segment of the presentation is going to be done by Gautam Shiknis, founder of Net Zero, along with Varun, who's sitting here. Gautam is a very, very passionate and eloquent proponent and thinker about the need and the technology of reducing greenhouse gases. He will provide an overview about the auditing, mitigation, and offset of emissions. The second segment is by Ram Pratap Singh, founder of the Indian School of Nature, or ISN, and he's going to give you a short introduction before we start. And owner of Chambal Safari Lodge. I think most of us know who he is. He's a man who wears many hats, and as you discovered, give him a mic and he never stops. And what RP is going to do is to illustrate in practical terms what such an audit looks like via an ongoing case study undertaken by him at Chambal Safari Lodge. And the final presentation is by Pooja Natrajan of Impact, who will talk about the communication element of this exercise, the importance of reporting sustainability in a globally accepted format. And that's the key. I mean, that's what I've been learning, in company of these people, is that this kind of sustainable conversation all of us want to do. We all do little things for sustainability. We all do the best we can. And this is not to downplay what we're all trying to do, but we have to now align with globally accepted formats and standards. That's the only way we are going to stay in business. So Pooja is going to talk about that, and she is actually going to make the case that there is a strong bottom line benefit when you adopt the efficiencies of sustainability. I mean, that's the key, okay? I mean, that's what I've been learning, over the last couple of months. So this is where we are going to be, and this presentation, by the way, is a precursor to a manual that jointly, this is not a collaboration just for this presentation. This is just a kickstart of an open-ended collaboration, we hope, that is going to come out with a manual, a toolkit for people to adopt, a plug-and-play toolkit that will make all of this very accessible, we hope. And that should be, we hope to get that out by the end of April. Is that right? End of April. Okay, RP, over to you.
Thank you, Hashim. So I'm going to spring a surprise on Hashim. So whatever had been decided, I'm going to go to the last slide first. And that's like a true blue engineer. You go to the last page, the conclusion, and then work backwards. So I take this opportunity to introduce the Indian School of Nature, which came into existence just about a year ago. And it's an impact-driven institution that we are trying to build in the 5 verticals of environment and wildlife conservation, climate smart and compatible agriculture, sustainable development and mitigating, adapting to climate change, renewable energy, and travel sustainable. So how is Indian School of Nature different from so many other institutions and universities and academic stuff? So number one, our focus is on impact, and the knowledge is going to be on an open source platform. So like so many institutions we know where they generate knowledge and then keep it close to their hearts and not share. So this is what's different, and we are collaborating with individuals and institutions across the board, nationally, internationally, to see that ISN becomes a platform where not just in travel, but all other verticals also, we become relevant and we are able to drive change. And so in that context, we started working on this concept of one of the lead programs or pathways to sustainability in the Indian jungles. There's a series of 5 layers, and today we are just talking about towards developing a manual of best practices for wildlife lodges. And so we restrict our discussion just to that. And with that, I'm back to you, Hashim. Yeah.
I'll require the HDMI. of all, thank you very much to Rare and Shobna and Shobha for having us here. It's opportunities like this which we look forward to, where we can give our spiel about what we think sustainability means. And that word has been going around for a long time over the last few days. I think in average it's repeated about 10 times per minute. But I mean, it got me wondering yesterday, what does it really mean, right? And it sounds like a solution that we're all moving towards, but what's the problem that we're trying to solve through sustainability? And for many people, it's almost symptomatic to be solved with home remedies. And there's nothing wrong with home remedies. Home remedies have been around forever. But until we all kind of get a grasp on what is the common underlying thing that is the sustainability problem, we may never be able to come on the same page and address things as one. So this is what actually net zero is about, is trying to give a quantitative and numeric context to sustainability. So I'm just going to ask you guys a bunch of questions and take a guess on whether these scenarios are good or bad. These are not trick questions, all right? So a person has a blood pressure of 190 by 100 as against a normal of 120 by 80. A car is driving at 80 kilometers per hour. A 5 foot 10 foot person, a 5 foot 10 inches person is 125 kgs of weight. Are these scenarios good or bad? Right? You would say they're bad, right? If a person is, that's what's called hypertension, right? Or acute severe hypertension. The other one is overspeeding. The third one is being overweight, right? These are all contextual problems which we have a sense with which we can relate to. Because we have two things over here which are very important. One is a number with which we define all of those, and second is a context to that number. So unfortunately, when it comes to climate, we don't have that. While we talk about sustainability very clearly and consistently all the time, we do it without having some sort of a benchmark or even a self-analysis or a self-evaluation with which we can look at our own self. So what is our individual carbon footprint? Have we ever calculated it? We all know our individual bank balances. We know hopefully, but do we know our carbon footprint? Do we know how much do we emit as individuals when we go from point A to point B? We don't have a lexicon with which we look at the climate problem, and that is one aspect of the issue. Is it high or low? Is it good or bad? Suppose if I told someone my carbon footprint is 28 tons per year. What does that even mean? Is that good? Is that bad? So the third being that what is the carbon emission of our business? As an enterprise, how much are we emitting? What is our per capita, per guest emission, etc., right? What are the averages that govern our industry? Are there any common standards that exist? And do we have any context or standard in evaluating the climate problem? So this is, according to us, the basis of the issue, that there is no numeric context to any of our conversations. And we believe that we lack a common terminology to speak the climate problem. The same words mean different things to different people. It's like the proverbial elephant in the room twice over. One is that entire metaphor of elephant in the room, and second is the story of the elephant in the room, where people are touching different parts of the elephant and seeing different things. So it's almost a two-pronged elephant. So there are two elephants in the room. So then there is an absence of climate literacy, okay? And we have been seeing this all over, from the biggest of CEOs to young people. There is no common language of climate that people are aware of or speaking. There is no fundamental knowledge about the science of climate change. Now, this again I'll come to in a slides moment. In a slide, the lack of quantified data about climate health indicators, and most climate action is unquantified and in subjective terms. This is a little bit of a bugbear for us because the climate issue is scientific and numeric. I asked this question at the beginning, what are we being sustainable towards? And the real answer out there is that 1.5 degree C number. Now, there are people who may or may not believe that number and have a lot of agendas governing that number, etc. We are not here, we are not the people to dispute that number, which has been put together by hundreds and thousands of scientists working for more than 50 years. So we have to begin with something being right and not imagine conspiracy theories everywhere. So this is that number that we believe is the real problem. And the second is that 35 billion tons per year approximately is the planet's current total emissions. Now, we have as a planet, before we hit the 1.5 degree C number, a quota of only 400 billion tons left. It's like how much oxygen is in the tank, which was being referred to, before we have to actually, before the problem becomes in our actual homes, right? So that is the gravity of the problem. Numerically, we have to be down to 12 billion tons of emissions per year from the 35 that we are. So which means literally if we all sit at home and only eat, we'll not be able to achieve that. So the problem is clear, the problem is pressing, and the problem begins with us having to get a handle on where we ourselves stand. So hence the brass tacks. I mean, we coming from the point that we need to move away from the slop, fluffy, feel-good language with which we address sustainability. And we need to embrace what we think is, and this is not saying anything adverse to anyone really, but we need to embrace an adult, scientific and numeric language to climate. I've been working in climate for more than 15 years. It's not a chip on the shoulder. It's not like, I'm an activist and I'm here to save Mother Earth from, I'm Varaha, the boar which is sinking the earth from the bottom of the ocean or whatever. Yeah, climate warrior, and please give me a badge on my shoulder. It's none of that. It's a common species problem. And we are, what I say, climate privileged. We have not felt the impact of climate change in our homes. We are sitting here in an air-conditioned room, which shouldn't be air-conditioned to begin with. But that's fine. I mean, we have our luxuries. We've never seen, like Gopi was showing us yesterday, water coming into people's homes for 12 years in a row. We've never seen that, so we don't know how real and how grave this problem is. And it cannot be mitigated unless we know what we have to do as adults. Oh, oops, almost done? Yeah, hence the brass tacks, okay? I'll take 2 more minutes and come there. Am I done with my 15? Oops, so much for numbers. Anyway, so what we are just talking about is quantifiable climate action. And to put it in a nutshell, the hospitality industry has these metrics that we need to look at very seriously. Okay, so what is the room's footprint per occupied room? What is the hotel carbon footprint per room? What is the hotel carbon footprint per occupied room, per square foot? So this is where things get into context and everyone knows where we stand. So I'm going to share this later. Anyone is interested? What is the water scale? And I think in Mr. Singh's presentation, this is covered a little more in detail. And everything can be measured and should be. First is emission, reduction, and lastly absorption. I'll skip to this and come to just that last part. We use dashboards, use tools which allow you to input all the data that you have to be able to get your emission together. Understand the measurements and then reduce them. So I think I'll just jump to the last slide. There is a bonus at the end of it where actually you can earn significant amounts of revenue if you get into the numeric game. So with that, I'll conclude and hand it over to Mr. Singh. Thank you so much for putting up with my whatever it was.
Thank you.
One of the things also is that that the Net Zero website also, which is worth having a look at, the Net Zero website also allows you to plug in your numbers and actually get your own carbon footprint and your hotel's carbon footprint already. So these dashboards are already in existence. And these are all leading towards the manual that we have been discussing.
Thank you, Hashim. So I'm going to present a case study. Right. So this is sort of, we started looking at this issue of sustainability at a small wildlife lodge. And I thought, why don't I experiment and do it at my own place? And so this is what we did over the last 3 years. So just to put the context, most of you know, but we operate a small lodge in the National Chambal Sanctuary, which is one of the best central Indian rivers for key species like gharials and Indian skimmers and Gangetic dolphins. So when we started 25 years ago, to some of the international audience, this person may not be known, but this was the biggest threat to sustainability. Forget about, I mean, if you don't live, then whatever. And when we moved there, the bandits were there, and Toby is witness to one such shootout when he was filming for the Ganges. The film was Ganges, and shootout happened in reality. He had to evacuate his production team. But then this was on the wane. The bigger threat was this, where rampant mining on the banks of Chambal, which is, the sand is supposed to be an excellent construction material. And that's the newspaper clipping, a really sad incident where a very, very young Indian Police Services officer was killed in broad daylight, and not killed, brutally killed by running a tractor over him again and again, because he was trying to fight out with the mining mafia. So the question was whether the sandbanks of Chambal, is it a resource or a habitat? And most people would call it a resource. And but then, as you see in the pictures here, these sandbanks give life. That's where the gharials and so many birds were nesting out in the open. And the critical questions were, I mean, the legislation was always in place, but it was not happening. I mean, nobody was concerned about, and the mining was carrying on rampantly. And also, in real terms, the local people did not have any livelihood options. So they were getting and working for the miners more because they were getting good money out of it. So that's where we and told him that I'm going to be taking international tourists into Chambal. And well, he sort of laughed. But then, even when I was putting my first boat on the river, the stories from, the horror stories from Corbett and Ranthambore were already commonplace, where how mass tourism was destroying the very habitat that it was supposed to conserve, or at least they were professing that they were going to be, tourism is going to support conservation, which was not happening in some of the pictures. And I was very, very scared that what is going to be the outcome on the Chambal River after 25 years. And it's the 25th year this year. And I'm going to now empirically prove, rather than making broad statements about how tourism supports conservation, et cetera, and so I want to move on. So to my mind, there are 5 pillars of sustainability, which any lodge should be looking at. So what are we doing to the air around us? And that can be measured by carbon, by sound, and by light. Very clear parameters. What are we doing to our water in terms of our consumption and also treatment? What are we doing to our land in terms of what kind of chemicals we are using, what kind of materials we are using, and are those materials sustainable, reusable? What are we doing to our community? Are we taking 70% of the profits away from our companies and spending them in a club in Delhi? Or is it really going back to the local communities, which we all profess that we are giving back? And that is also measurable. You give me your balance sheet and I'll tell you whether you are spending local or not. And then, of course, the conservation, which the whole premise is for ecotourism and nature tourism is built around that it supports conservation. But in a very tangible way, we have to find out whether we're really supporting conservation or not. So there, I move on to the numbers from Chambal Safari Lodge. 20 acres of land was rewilded over last 25 years. And the calculations are there in the annexure. But from a very layman's on-ground calculation, the absolute carbon offset that we have is 5.87 tons per annum. But if I go on to another set of calculation using satellite imagery, then this could go up, this could actually be close to 50 tons. And similarly, now the logic for me is that I could be doing something else with this family estate, but because it's for tourism, so the onus of this positivity is on my guest. And if they are coming and staying with me for X number of nights, so I've given you a figure of carbon positivity per room night. And that comes to roughly about 5.5 kg. The bandwidth is between 5 to 50 kgs. So this is what your guests, and we are now making our guests aware of this, that by staying with us and you paying for it, we are going the sustainable way. So the market is driving the sustainability. This is something which Hashim feels that it should be done. And this is just an indicator of what it was 25 years ago and what it is, what the...
Yeah, so I mean, basically what you're saying is that the fact that you are there doing tourism is what is leading to this conservation and to this carbon capture and this water capture.
True.
If tourism hadn't been there, it would just have been barren ground.
Yeah, or maybe I would have been part of the mining family. So the next is energy and the various consumption, with a hybrid model using solar and grid power. But the important figure here is electricity consumption per room night is 49.12 units. The entire consumption loaded only onto the room night because the revenue is loaded onto the room night. And so to give you a bandwidth, so the globally accepted norm for electric consumption in rural areas is about 100 units. So we are less than half of that. Water positivity is a big success with us, I must say. Entire 52-acre of farm and forest at the Chambal Safari Lodge is rainwater harvested. And so the detailed calculations of how much is lost in evaporation and transpiration, etc., is in the annexure. But our net rainwater positivity is about 42.79 million liters per annum is what we are, is net water after consumption and all of the losses. So water positivity, again, per room night is 37,400 liters. And that's a very big number. We've tried to implement all sorts of, land-friendly, so the waste management practices, which is no rocket science, using all kinds of environment-friendly toiletries, cleaners, laundry, and materials, of course, plastic-free. So in fact, some of the green vendors are listed here, and you can immediately go shift your purchases to this set of green vendors. Very important part of a wildlife lodge, whether it's existing or a new one coming up, is how you're using your land and what percentage is acceptable to the total land area that you have. And to my mind, 2 to 3%, and this should include the curated areas, and the pathways are also to be considered as part of your built-up area. And then, of course, materials. Now that is another vertical at Indian School of Nature where we are developing a module where if there's a new wildlife lodge coming up, how they can use local materials. Everybody wants to do it, but there are no solutions or nobody to come and say, okay, I will do it for you and I've got the contractor and I've got, so that's the delivery level that we are trying to create. But just towards the manual, how we are using repurposed, not antique really, but old furniture, so the carbon footprint is restricted. Colored linen and soft furnishings is a huge, really important thing, which probably one of the best practices to be adopted by the lodges. Of course, locally grown produce, and a lot of it has already been talked about, but this will all go into a manual eventually. Available on the ISN platform and supported by Net Zero. The community. Now this is quite a bit of it is gray area, so we all talk about how we are supporting the local communities. But this has to be put it into a number. And this you can do it, it's very simple. You just take your balance sheet for the last 3 years and start ticking what is you consider as local. And local could be defined in different contexts, but maybe 15, 20 kilometer periphery, if the money is actually going to people from businesses from that area, that's local. But obviously, buying from a Walmart is not, even if the Walmart is located in your right in your back door. So for us, that number is 67%, and of course, seeding small enterprises, creating micro entrepreneurs around you, is very, very important, and that's I'm going to talk about it in the next slide. But at Chambal, coming from the Bandits to now, and the bird festivals, our population around us they feel better about themselves. We used to feel everybody thought we were a bunch of goons. Coming from there now, people think we are bird watchers, which is different. And to put a number to the last pillar of sustainability for any wildlife lodges, how is the conservation, how has it really helped the national park or the sanctuary where you're operating? And in Chambal, when we started in 1999, in the zone that we used to operate our boat, there used to be just one nesting site for gharials. And today that number is up to about 5 nesting sites. So I have a strong case here to prove that that area in which we have been operating tourism in a very responsible way, the number of boats are still restricted to 3. 2 privately operated and 1 operated by the Forest Department, so that the animal behavior has not been impacted. And very early, even before the carrying capacity studies were made mandatory by the Supreme Court, in 2006 in Chambal, we did that management plan, tourism management plan, where we said that the number of boats in any zone should not be more than 3, and only 2 could operate at any given point in time. So coming to, of course, these calculations are there. Anybody, once the links are available, you could check, and if there are any doubts, you could always get back to us on these calculations. But I'll just stop on this slide of carbon calculation. So one study, which was on a rewilding project in Knepp Estate in UK, carried by Natagel and Tree Economy and Agri-Carbon companies, they have given us a ballpark figure of about 5.2 tons per hectare could be your carbon offset. If you just want to very simply calculate that my lodge is 20 acres and convert that into hectare, and if it is rewilded well, including open spaces and scrubland, etc., so you could possibly be offsetting about 5 tons per hectare of land available to you. So next step for wildlife lodges could be that, of course, we're not there to promote mass tourism. As I just said earlier, to create micro-entrepreneurs around you, and that could possibly be done in agriculture domain, not necessarily increasing your rooms. And so at Chambal, we started a farmer-producer organization with 600 plus farmers. It's called Chambal Agritech Incubator, where we are working on with small farmers, about 600 plus, on various agri-products, grown sustainability. But more important is that we have given them a platform to market their produce through us at Wild Chambal. So now the footprint of our ecotourism operation is not just restricted to a few hundred people, but a few thousand people are now directly part of our Chambal story and the Chambal family. I think I've made myself.
And if I'm not mistaken, Gautam, this is not working.
You take this.
If I'm not mistaken, Gautam, that is going to be part of your strategy of creating carbon credits, is these ancillary activities. One part of it is going to be ancillary activities. And one of the things that I just want to add is that from all that I've been reading about and listening to everybody else, the real key to the first thing that we really need to do is to reduce emissions, reduce waste, reduce use of water. Reduction is the first thing that we need to do. And as we look at all of these things, I've also owned lodges and run lodges in some very harsh areas. And the biggest lesson that we are finding is the challenge of actually looking critically at how we use our resources and how important it is to reduce everything. I'll give you a simple example, that if you just change your roof, you get a good architect, and there's a very good architect out here, Aditi sitting out here, and I hope that she will also be joining our effort as an advisor, consultant, whatever. But if you use just simple things like change your roof. That will reduce your temperatures, and that means your entire energy coefficients change dramatically. So where you might be using a 2-ton air conditioner, you will be able to bring it down to 1 ton and using it maybe only for a couple of hours rather than keeping it on all the time, and same for heating. So simple things can make the change, and Pooja is going to actually now take over and talk about how these things and the reporting of all of that. Yeah.
I'll just add. So the next step is what we're working on for our friends from who are travel company owners, is to develop a sustainable India itinerary, where you can give actual numbers to your guests that, okay, I take a flight from Heathrow to Delhi, this is the carbon footprint. Now after that, I stay at XYZ places, I'm offsetting this much carbon and this much water positivity I'm bringing in. And then, so eventually, if there can be an India itinerary which is carbon zero, then I think that's the target which we should be working towards. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Shobha and Rare for this opportunity. And I'm going to begin with a question to all of you. So do you think that greenwashing, I mean, I'm assuming all of us know here what greenwashing is. Do you think it's wrong, greenwashing? Yes, it is, right? What's equally wrong is greenhushing. What you're doing, and you're not talking about it, is equally wrong. And that's where I come in, talking about communicating what you're doing, no matter where you are at your journey. And I think this is a problem that I face when I talk to people, asking them to talk about their sustainability journey. They say, but we're not there yet. We haven't done enough. It doesn't matter. You have to talk about it, because it is your responsibility to report what you're doing, not only for you to benchmark, but also to inspire others around you. So this is Pooja here. I'm the founder of P&JX and Marketing, with a marketing and communications partner of Rare. And I'm also the founder of Impart Collective, which is a reporting and communicating, sustainability communications company. So to get started, I'm going to ask you, why is sustainability important to your business? Of course, beyond the obvious. Yes, we all need to do it. It's really important. We need to get towards net zero. But what I'm trying to really ask you is not from the point of view of being responsible, but even for your own business, from the point of view of profits. Why is it important? And the answer is that your guests are getting more and more conscious. I mean, we might think that they're not, but you'll be surprised. I'm going to introduce you to this very interesting audience segment that's growing in number, which is called LOHAS, which is Lifestyle of Health and Sustainability. This audience is extremely conscious about their health. They're also conscious about the planet. They're conscious about where their food is coming from, what, where they're staying, how much carbon footprint is coming out of their travel, out of everything that they're doing. And you will be pretty surprised that there is a growing number of LOHAS in India as well. I mean, I'm not even talking about the world here, I'm talking about India. In India, we all assume that Indians are not very conscious, but you'll be surprised this number is growing, and the numbers are all there. And it's going to grow. And why this is important to you? If you don't communicate what you're doing, even if you're doing a lot, you're going to miss out on your competition going to communicate. So it's competitive advantage for you to talk about your sustainability journey. So let's look at some of the global perspectives in sustainability. And this is where I'm going to, maybe a little bit scare all of you. I'm apologizing in advance. So I'm sure all of you have heard that there's a lot of talk, in the COP and world over about various sustainability directives that are coming into place, led by the EU and, followed by Asia and the USA. I'm not going to get into specifics. You can read up about it online. But coming to the specific scenario that we are in today, EU is mandating certain targets. It has already put out targets for large companies, but it's also putting out target in 2025 for small and medium-sized companies. How does that affect you? Is because they're supposed to even put in the scope 3. And in scope 3, lodges, hotels, everyone comes into picture. If India and Indian hotels don't take a stand and move towards reporting, it's not about getting into net zero right away. It's about reporting. It's about disclosures. It's about talking about what is your carbon footprint? Where are you in that journey? If you don't talk about it, they will be forced not to use India as a destination. And I think as a country, as a destination, we are at a huge risk of losing a lot of business. So I think we need to start, I mean, I'm not really sure when the Indian government is going to mandate this, but I think we need to start voluntarily disclosing our emissions, disclosing our impact, business impact, so that we don't lose out on business. And this is going to happen because I keep talking to travel companies in the EU, and they all are talking about, okay, we have to start moving towards only using hotels, only using tour operators who are disclosing. Because yes, they may be our friends, we may be working together for 20 years, 25 years, but we have to disclose it in our reports and we don't have the data from them. What are we going to do? I mean, so it's about their business and then it comes down to our business as well. So I think, so this is where I said that I'm scaring all of you. We don't start recording and reporting our disclosures, it is a huge business risk. Yeah. So I think Gautam would be a better person to talk about that.
So it was part of my untimed presentation. So scope 1 and scope 2 are things directly attributable to you. Scope 3 are your entire supply chain, upstream and downstream, very briefly put. Okay, so which means that anything that goes into making of your business or downstream when your business actually gets out into the market. To very quickly, it's like we are measuring the emissions of this event, and all your travel of having attended this event is the scope 3 of this business, okay, or of this event. And unless we measure this, we can't really dictate how much emission this event has caused. I mean, outside of the humongous amount of electricity that we've consumed, which, yeah.
Yeah, so to begin with, I'm sure you can see some of these names, you can recognize these, I'm sure a lot of these are giving you business. All of these are now have to mandatorily disclose their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So, I mean, it's just a matter of time when every travel company, tour operator in the EU will have to report. And it's going to be a problem for us if we don't. So some of the risks of non-disclosure, we've already touched upon it, competitive advantage. It's going to be a disadvantage if we don't report. It's going to be an advantage if we report. Regulatory risks, as I talked about. Also financial implications. There's another presentation that I have, which I will share with Rare for you to access, to see the actual numbers of a lot of hotels when they've had remarkable bottom lines because of sustainability initiatives. So I think that's, again, another direct connection between business, profit, and sustainability. So where do we start? So I've just broken it down. I think the best place to start, I think, as Mr. Singh also pointed out, more clearly than this, is to sort of understand what your key sustainability indicators are. Just sort of make an audit, make a team, put a team together and just understand what are your business impacts. I mean, there could be like a lot more than what I've put here together, but this is sort of where you get started with. And sort of create a strategy plan. And I think when I say strategy, I'm not trying to overwhelm you. I think something really simple, something effective, something that every part of your team can understand. Because I think what we keep doing is, yes, while it's important to talk about jargons, it's important to talk about the technicality, but it's also important to break it down. Because sustainability is not something that one person in the company can achieve. It has to be a joint and team effort. So you commit, you identify what are your key sustainability indicators, you plan, you take action, you review, and you report. Very, very important is to report. I think we should stop being worried about people trolling us online. I know that, I mean, being a part of operating a social media company, I understand how difficult and overwhelming it can be when people start trolling you online. But I think it's okay. If they're trolling you, that means you're doing something right. You know, that's just what I tell my clients. It's okay if you're trolled. It's okay if you're criticized. Because you're doing something, you're going to be criticized. But doing is important. I think it's important, like I said, to put a dream team together for measuring and reporting your sustainability. And I don't think that you need to look at someone outside. I think that you need to create that team within your own employees. And I think if you sort of educate them as to why this is important, everyone will get on board. And how do you develop a communication strategy? I'm just going to break it down. Stakeholder engagement. Extremely important. This is the first starting point. And stakeholders are not just shareholders. Stakeholders are everyone related to your business, including your vendors, including your marketing partners, everyone, including your travel agents. You need to identify them and try to sort of develop a plan, keeping all of them in mind. Yes, it can be overwhelming. Like I said, break it down. Break it down into bite-sized, actionable points. Define very clear goals, because it's, I mean, you can have a net zero goal, but not necessarily that it's realistic. So make goals that are realistic for your company. I mean, you cannot achieve having green energy implementation overnight. It needs a lot of investment. But I think it's important to go step by step. And it's okay what that step is. It can be baby steps, but importantly, you're moving forward. Create a narrative. No matter how big your sustainability story is or how small it is, I think it's important to create a narrative. It's important to say that, okay, I have taken this step, and why I have taken the step, why this is my first step. It's important to talk about that. Use data effectively. This is one of the examples that I've put together where Rare, through their touchstones, in fact, talks about how many hotels have adopted water conservation strategies. And I think it's important to put a number, like, I think, which was already highlighted pretty well by Gautam as well as Mr. Singh, that numbers are important. I think we cannot just be very obscure that, oh yeah, I'm a sustainable hotel. Because people are going to start asking you, how so? What are you doing? What are your numbers? So start documenting it, start calculating your numbers, even if it's a small step. It does not have to be that you have all your numbers. It does not mean that you have to have your entire carbon footprint in place. Maybe it could be a small operation. You could start with your kitchen, or you could start with front office. It could be anything, but get started. But talk about numbers. And transparency. I think it's really important to be transparent. It's okay to say that, okay, at this moment of time, I cannot evade plastic bottles. I think people are like, oh, you know, you get this reaction, right? But yes, as a business owner, it is up to you, because you know how difficult it is for you to implement something like that in maybe a remote destination where you don't have access. I mean, your guests' health is also extremely important. I mean, you cannot put your guests' health at risk by evading, you know, plastic and keeping a glass bottle, and if the water is not safe, then you're going to run into bigger problems than sustainability. So I think it's important to say, hey, this is what I can do right now, but I'm doing it. And this is my target. It's very important to also say that, okay, my target is in the next 2 years, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to achieve this. But just be transparent about it and be cool about it, and don't bother about getting trolled. Engage across platforms. And I think we use social media so effectively to talk about our product, we talk about our experiences and everything, but we don't use social media to talk about our sustainability journey. And I think we need to start doing that. We need to start talking about what steps we are taking, small, big, no matter what, regardless. We need to use social media, because social media can really amplify. And it can amplify not only in a way that you know, you're inspiring others, but the moment you make a commitment on social media, you put a target saying that, hey, I'm going to do this. You have to do it. So it's kind of like also a deadline for you to start looking at. Empower your employees, create ambassadors within your own team, and respond to feedback. I think it's really important when you're getting feedback from outside, from your own stakeholders, from your guests, from your partners, respond to it. Don't let it unattended to. And of course, be on top of the game. Keep updated on all regulatory changes. Like I said, EU is going really aggressive with it. We don't want to lose the game. So keep updated with the latest regulatory changes. India is also going to put in some mandates very soon. Monitor and report. Very, very important to monitor. Gautam has talked about it quite in detail about how you monitor, how you capture your data. Also report. Report it publicly, not only report it within your own stakeholders. It's really important to put it out there. Why I'm saying this is because as an industry, we need data. We need data to understand how many hotels have started on this journey, how many hotels have started capturing the data. So it's important as an industry, as a nation, and as a global community to start benchmarking. So we all have the responsibility to report. And there are some reporting standards. I would highly recommend using GRI because it kind of very well, it's called Global Reporting Initiative. It integrates very well with standards across the world. Because there are so many standards. There's one from the EU, there's one in the US, there's one in Asia, and it can be very overwhelming. GRI is a good place to start because it's really easy to use that tool to get started on your reporting. A little bit about Impart. We are based both in Milan in the EU as well as in India. We're based in Bangalore. And we undertake reporting and communications for companies of any scale, but my interest particularly is travel and hospitality because, I mean, I'm in love with this industry, so I'd like to get started with this industry, and if any of you would like to chat about this, happy to take this on. Thanks very much for your audience.
So, thanks everyone. I think we've run out of time. Sorry? Okay, now? Yeah? Yeah, so they're going to come on now, right? Yeah, so if you have any questions, and I said all of this is going to be captured in this manual that is going to come out. So, and hopefully it will be a plug and play manual. So it is going to cover all of the elements that we talked about, which is basically auditing or monitoring, including mitigation. It is going to be reporting in the way been talked about, and the key, which actually is, the final test, is validation or verification. So it's, internationally it is known as MRV. And all of these three elements are all going to be part of the manual or toolkit. I think we're running out of time, so we won't be able to take questions. This other, yeah, okay. Does anybody have any questions?
I must point out all the life forms that occur at our property probably are the biggest stakeholders.
I agree.
All of us, we must point that out first.
I
they are
agree.
there, that's why we are there.
In fact, interestingly, to answer your question, I've raised this internationally to a lot of my professors when I was studying abroad as well. Why don't we consider, forests and biodiversity as a stakeholder? And I think they're sort of sitting on the fence on that. And in fact, I used Jim's Jungle Retreat as a case study and said, look at how they're using, biodiversity as a stakeholder within their own property. And I think it's really important what you said. I completely agree, Manoj.
Which just comes to one other point that you make, that, we very often talk about green technologies as if it is, and emissions and carbon sequestration, etc. But all of this has to converge and be in alignment with biodiversity saving targets as well. Remember, there are two COPs out there. There's the biodiversity COP, and there is the climate COP. Both of these are converging, and both of these actually dovetail. Both of these must be taken care of. And to give you a simple example of where we have to think about, we talk about green energy, and instantly solar comes. Solar and wind are very problematic energy sources. But it becomes even more problematic if we put solar on the ground. As soon as you put solar on the ground, you're covering and you're destroying biodiversity. Solar on the roof works. Solar on the ground doesn't work. So, these are simple things that we need to think about and talk about. And we need to examine. Somebody was talking about that yesterday. I think it was Tamra, the lady from Tamra was talking, and she made an excellent point. Energy and our mix of energy is appropriate. There are appropriate times to use different sources of energy. So it isn't always that, a so-called green source is always appropriate, relevant, or right. So you have to examine that. You have to actually do a good energy audit. And all of us as owner managers or owner, we know this. So don't take sort of, fashionable solutions. That's very important. Everything has to be subjected to minute audit and examination. And biodiversity has to be part of the consideration. Remember, there are two COPs, biodiversity COP, and they're both existential issues for us. We are losing insects and microbial communities at a rate we don't even know or understand. So the point RP made, and this is something that all lodges should be very, very aware of, we light up our pathways. Do we need to light up our pathways? Light pollution is a major driver, as we are discovering, of insect extinction. And we don't even understand how it works. We only know that there's a consequence. We don't actually even know the mechanics of that, of that extinction. So, any other questions? Yes.
I've got a question regarding measurement of scope 1, 2, and 3. It seems to me that we're talking about measuring, looking into the future, and what we're using now is going to be using in the future. How should we be thinking about the building materials that we've used in the past, the embodied carbon that went into creating our accommodations, and all the carbon that we've used to create an accommodation, and now we're starting to measure moving forward. What responsibility do we have for knowing and understanding and measuring and thinking about past carbon emission creation?
A significant amount. So where we do work, we encourage people to actually set one as a fixed historical emission that they have contributed to. In many cases, unfortunately, the problem is data. Everyone does not necessarily have, I think in the entire measurement process, the real bottleneck is people's ability and willingness and speed with which they put data together. So ideally, like there are a couple of properties we're working with right now, we are getting every aspect of their building material inventoried for its emissions. We like to also get involved in the planning of things like itineraries and what you're going to do in the future so that you don't make high emission decisions. So involvement is not just from purely, we're not just accountants. We're also strategic input providers so that what you've done is figured out and what you're going to be doing going forward is also the most optimal. So it's both. Yeah.
So I just like to add, so the best building is an existing building. Whatever of carbon had to be produced has been produced. So if we can reuse a building, that's possibly the way forward.
And wood. There seems to be a sort of a thing. That's a great question, by the way. Because we really need to think about this. And these are gray areas. And how do we do it? And how do we tackle with that? I think that's really important. But, wood is a fantastic material. It is organic. It grows. You don't dig it out. There are ways. There are actually plantations available. You go through all of central India. There are vast plantations of teak. Teak is a fantastic material. We should use it. And it does two things. You're growing. As it is growing, it is capturing carbon. And when you use it in a building, it is storing carbon for much longer than that carbon would be stored in nature. So a certain amount has to obviously decay. That is important for the life cycle. But when you use excess wood, surplus wood, that is much better than any steel, concrete, cement, or even mud, because mud also has to be dug out. So wood is a fantastic material. Please use it. If you're retrofitting, if you're building, if you're planning, and as RP has done in his lodge, many of us have done in our lodges. Dhruv is sitting over here. Fantastic, stuff that he's done with wood, and actually, one of the guys who I would say pioneered the idea of making wood fashionable. It's a fantastic material, and we should do it. But how we measure what we've already done, the crimes of the past, gray area. Okay. So please, Mr. Sandeep Jain, I know you did tell me about this thing. So Mr. Jain is the chairman and managing director of HandFab, a living based in Panipat in Haryana, producing home and bathroom furnishing products and working with the hospitality industry as well. He has put forth the idea of, do hotels need to use only white linen? This is a great question. And we all know that white linen, white towels are the worst thing to use.